Welcome everyone to another episode of Financial 15. Coming back to the topic of whether or not you should invest or pay off debt. Interest rates have jumped since the last time we talked about it, so it's a whole different set of equation. We're going to get into that today. You definitely want to stick around.
A year ago with interest rates and things doing well, we didn't have to worry about it. Were you worried about investing or paying off debt? You did one. You didn't care about the other. But today we got to start to concentrate on those things. So in this Financial 15, if you want more information on this one or any of the other ones we've done, please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Simple, click, click, click. You're in there and you'll get great content going forward. Also like us on Facebook. And most importantly, visit our website at beckerorr.com. There's blogs, there's events. There's a whole bunch of information there for you that will be useful for your financial situation. But today we're dealing with the topic we've dealt with beforehand. Should you invest or should you pay off debt today, depending on if you have excess cash around? Clint, do we have a clear definition on this or how are we going to start it?
Oh, we definitely have to dive into the debt side of the equation first, because that's the one that's gotten much more expensive since the last time we talked about this. The last time we did this was a year, 2 years back, and interest rates were quite low. It was very common for people to be paying 2, 3, 4%. You can pretty much double those numbers now to get a good idea of where we are today. But framework, how do you approach this question? I think you always approach it from the debt side of the equation. And you want to start with, all right, what are the criteria? First criteria, the type of debt you have, right? There's a difference between having a mortgage on a home and having, say, credit card debt, right, Kevin?
Yes, I mean, it's huge. I mean, that's the biggest factor to decide. Your debt on something that continues to appreciate, yeah, you never like having it, but at least you got something there that's going to go up in value. It's your depreciating assets, as you mentioned, your credit cards, or if you've got a car loan, these are all depreciating assets. You know, the larger the debt is on that, maybe the debt's approaching whatever the cost is or whatever the value is of that depreciating asset. So that's one thing to concern. The other one would be whether it's secured debt or unsecured debt. Is it like a mortgage, which is secured by your house, or, you know, a car, which is secured by that? Or is it something like credit card debt? That's basically unsecured. You don't have anything behind those. The type of debt you have is going to be a huge factor as to how you want to pay it off and when you want to pay it off. I think that's part of the large reason. It's more of that general rule, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because unsecured debt tends to be more expensive, right? The bank doesn't have collateral. If it's against a house, the mortgage rate, well, it's gone up recently, but still it's going to be less than the credit card rate or less than an unsecured loan. So essentially, you're tackling the higher risk, higher rate debt first by following this criteria. And I'll flip up another one here. So the type of debt's important. The amount of debt also important. If you only have $1,000 on your credit card, not the end of the world. If you've got 10 grand, 12 grand, well, now it becomes a big problem. And the technical term here, they're using credit utilization. It's a factor in your credit score, but it measures your debt load compared to your overall ability to have credit. So simple example, if you got one credit card, $2,000 limit, you used half it, used $1,000, well, it's 50% utilization. And keep in mind, even if you have multiple credit cards, Kevin, and you don't use them, the banks and credit unions are still going to use that when they start factoring in their ratios in terms of your ability to get new debt, right? So this utilization factor is important. And essentially, if you want to boil it down to a simple rule, if you have lots of debt relative to your credit limit or just lots of debt in general, makes sense to start paying that down, right? You want to put yourself in a good financial position. So if you need to go get more debt for another reason, something pops up, if you have very, very high utilization, you're not going to be able to get that new loan. Give yourself the flexibility, pay it down. So the amount of debt here is crucial. Did you want to add to that, Kevin?
Yeah, no, I mean, you basically hit it. I mean, that's why I'd say, you know, you got a credit card, maybe 2 at the most. You don't want to have 10 or 15 credit cards because whether you use them or not, you're considered to use them when you're dealing with how debt is evaluated, because if they've got 10 different credit cards, they assume you've got something on every one. You're right. It makes it harder to get debt going forward. And also having to pay that off, especially if you do have something on those 10 credit cards. So again, that's a huge factor as to how you decide whether I'm investing money or whether I'm paying off debt.
Absolutely. We're talking about criteria. We started on the debt side of the equation. We said, all right, the type of debt, the amount of debt. And this is the one I think everyone's going to jump to here. Criteria number 3 is going to be the interest rate, right?
Huge.
And this is going to be far, far more of a factor today than it was 18 months ago or even 6 months ago, the way they raised rates. But the higher the rate, obviously, the more incentive there is to pay it off. But it's not just about the interest rate. I think sometimes people fall into that, well, I made 7% on my investments and the interest rate is 6%. So the investments are clearly the better option. Some of that math makes sense, but it is a little more complicated, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you also have to look at what the risk profile is when you're dealing with these sort of scenarios. And that's huge. I mean, you may have made 10% on your investments last year, but is that your average? If you're averaging 6% every year and you had one great year, sure, I'd love to keep it in there. But if you want to get those high rate of returns, you got a lot more risk and you can lose a lot more money that way. Whereas if you have a 7% debt, as you've mentioned beforehand, paying that off is like guaranteed money you're making. By not having to make those payments anymore because you paid that debt off, you're saving that 7% every year. That's a guaranteed rate of return of getting that 7% back in sort of a theoretical series as how you want to deal with it. So risk tolerance for how much you want to be able to deal with is huge and when you want to pay it off. Again, you had the 2% interest rates beforehand. Nobody really concerned about that. It's really small. Chances are in a balanced portfolio, you're making a better number. But if you're now at 6 or 7 and your average portfolio return is anywhere near that 6 point, maybe you do want to pay this off. It's much easier to get rid of that debt and hold on than to try and get that percentage rate.
Yeah, the lower risk option is to pay off the debt. So if you have a conservative individual and you say, you know what, I want the low risk option, we'll pay off the debt because like you talked about, that's guaranteed. You know exactly what you're going to save. This is the interest rate on the contract of the loan or the mortgage or whatever form of debt you have. So that is always the low risk option, is simply paying down the debt. If you want a general rule, and here we're not talking about low risk folks, saying, all right, if you're middle of the road, you're medium risk, you tend to do balanced investments and you want a rough guide and keep this as a rough guide, it would be using that 6% threshold. In the past, I told folks 5%, but we're in a different environment now. Rates are much higher than they were in the past, so everything's over 5% when it comes to debt. 6 would probably be a better threshold for the current environment. So if you have debt 6% or up, well, you probably want to prioritize the debt. And this whole question that we have to keep in mind, invest or pay off debt. We jumped into the debt side. We gave you a couple of criteria there, but the whole framework is really saying you've got extra money, right? It's saying, all right, I got some extra cash that came in. What is the best way to handle that? And there's a few quick items here. And the first one is you have extra cash. Before you even talk about debt or investments, you really should be talking about the emergency fund.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the biggest one to go off with it. I mean, everybody's okay, well, I've got this extra debt. Let me pay off this, or, everybody sees that if they don't take money out of their bank account, I'm just going to spend everything I have. No, I mean, these are options that you got to look at. Yeah. Do I want to spend it? Do I want to invest it? Do I want to pay off debt? Making sure you have that emergency fund in case something comes up, loss of a job or other unforeseen circumstances. That's the most important thing. Have that first. If this is money beyond that, then that's where this consideration comes in. But first, you want to make sure that you have yourself a pool in case something goes on. That's always what the emergency fund is. We're not worried about paying off debt or investing. You need that capital just in case. So having that emergency fund is huge. That, you're right, is the first one. But what else can we deal with on that?
Yeah, quickly on the emergency fund, in terms of a rule of thumb, everyone does a little different number. 3 to 6 months of living expenses tends to be the norm, somewhere in there. But all right, you cross that one off the boat or off the list. Money comes in, you have the emergency fund. You don't just have to pick one, is the other framework here we want to introduce, right? It doesn't have to be, I have to invest or I have to pay off debt.
That's
you can do both. That is a good problem to have, right? You've got extra money coming in. You already have the emergency fund. Well, maybe pay off some of the highest interest debt, and then you invest the rest in your TFSA, or you knock down a little bit on the mortgage and you invest a bit in your RSP. You can do a combination, right? It's not an either or proposition. You can do a bit of both.
Yeah, and I mean, that's always the old topic that they used to use for the RSP. Well, make the RSP contribution because you get the investment. When you get the money back from your taxes, then you put that on the debt, whether you borrowed the money for the RSP or you're paying off something else. So you can do both of them that way, just the way things work out. So yeah, there is no right conclusion to say, oh, I have to pay off debt or I have to invest the money. You can split it and do both. It's all going to depend on what your situation looks like going forward.
Yeah, and again, this whole question is really an optimization type of question. Paying off debt or investing, both are good for your financial well-being, right? They're both going to advance your financial plan. It's really a question of which one advances more, and everyone's situation is going to be different. We give you a couple of criteria, a framework of how to make the decision, and I think you know where this is leading, Kevin. Ideally, you want something personalized. You're going to need to have a specific financial plan, and then within the context of your specific financial plan, you can find the optimal solutions. All right, in my specific case, it makes more sense to pay off debt or to invest or do a bit of both, right? But that's the key. If you want to really optimize it, you're going to need a full financial plan.
Yeah, the Becker Orr mantra of having a plan is key to everything that goes forward for anything that we do. This is part of the process that you need to take a look at. And you do. You have to be able to figure out Well, is investing best for me right now? Is paying off my debt best for me? What's my job situation look like? All those things are all interactive and they need to be put together. Without that, you're just sort of throwing darts at a board and hoping for the best. But again, if there are any questions that you have on this or any of the other Financial 15 or topics that we have on our website, please visit us at chatwithclintonandkevin.com. We are more than happy to answer any of the questions you have on this and look at financial plans for you in that aspect as well. But today we've decided, investing or paying off debt, it really depends on your situation, what your interest rates are, and a variety of the other criteria that we've had from there. Is there anything else you want to add to conclude this, Clint?
I think that sums it up nicely. We'll leave it there. Take care, folks. We'll be back again soon.